everyone, and welcome to She Rides, the podcast where women's cycling takes the lead. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Christoph, and today we're diving into the latest race results and hot topics in women's cycling.
We have a guest joining us to share her story. Let's get started. Ready? Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of She Rides. Of course, we're the week after the Tour of Flanders, but we have some other important things to talk about and a very exciting guest. Hi, Connie.
Hiya.
Maybe before we start, can you explain to our listeners who are you?
So I'm Connie Hayes. I'm 24. I'm based in the UK, and I race for O'Shea Racing, which is a UK-based continental women's team.
Okay, nice. But of course, April, apart from a very important period in cycling and in the Spring Classics, it's also a very important month for autism. Can you maybe share a bit about your diagnosis and your experience with it?
So I obviously have always been autistic. I didn't know officially up until a few years ago, when I was at university. I'd sort of got through school, sport and everything like that, and then I went to uni, and it became very quickly apparent that I was different. And then went for assessments and everything like that. The UK system is quite complicated to get diagnosed. So yeah, I received a diagnosis in my 20s. And yeah, it's sort of a weird overlap because obviously it's me, so it does affect me on the bike, in a team environment and everything like that. So it sort of brings a unique aspect to cycling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Let's start now with like a question we ask all our guests. How did you first get into cycling, actually?
So my dad had always raced in the UK. He'd always just done domestic stuff, and I'd had zero interest in it as a child. We'd go to watch all the races in Belgium, sort of before it was a thing that British people did. And it was sort of at a time where you'd sort of see the odd British car go to watch, and it was sort of this very niche thing that my family would go and do. And I hated it. I only really liked going because Lamprey at the time had a pink and blue kit. And being a sort of 6-year-old child, that's what I was interested in. Other than collecting pink bottles and the odd sort of pink cap, I had no interest in cycling whatsoever. And then in my last year we do primary school in the UK, which is up to about the age of 11. And in my last year of that, we had to do cycling. And I realised that actually I was quite good and I was able to beat all the boys, where I hadn't been particularly sporty up to that point as a child. And then from that, I went and joined my local club, which was Lee Valley Youth, which is a big sort of under 16 club in London. And yeah, it sort of went from there basically. And I was never particularly good as a child. My youth years were pretty disastrous. And then I sort of got more into it as a junior and started training properly. And that's where I sort of realised I really enjoyed what I did, and yeah, it's just gone from there really.
That's true. And so on top of that, and the cycling, how does your diagnosis impact your daily life and your career in cycling? I guess it's being aware of yourself, and then probably that's
Yeah, it's a hard one because I don't know life any different. So sort of it does impact me daily, but I possibly don't realise how much it does and it doesn't, because I've obviously never lived a sort of so-called normal, in inverted commas, life. On the cycling front, there's a lot of positives. I'm incredibly committed. If I've got a training session, I go out and do it. So I spent 2 months last year trying to ride on a knee that was really badly injured, but we'll get to that later. So on one hand, I'm sort of very, very committed. If I'm told to go and do a 3-hour training ride, that 3-hour training ride is happening, even if it's on the turbo or something crazy like that. On the other hand, I'm quite different. I struggle socially. I've got quite a small social battery. So something like a stage race is quite difficult because you're around people, you're in quite an intense environment for several days. So that can be really challenging for me. And almost knowing my limits as well is something that the last few years, post-diagnosis, I've learned a little bit more. I know where I'm getting tired and I'm going to approach burnout. And I've sort of allowed myself to go, no, you can rest, you can sit that race out if you think you've done too much in a block, more socially than physical. And yeah, it overlaps drastically. I mean, it's my life, so it sort of does, I can't escape that element of myself. But it's knowing when to stop has always been my thing. And knowing, you're approaching burnout, it's okay to say, look, I can't do whatever's coming up or something like that, and sort of alternate plans. But then at the same time, one of my things is I can't deal with change particularly well. So if I've got a plan to be racing something at the weekend, say, I then struggle to change that. So it brings positives, and at the same time, it then brings negatives. It's just sort of weighing the two up, I guess.
Yeah, it's balancing the fine road between load and overload, I guess. On one hand, I can imagine as a coach, you're the model athlete to have. But on the other hand, when it gets too busy and too much, it's getting difficult because then you have to interrupt the schedule and say like, "Ooh, temper down, Connie. You need some rest because
Yeah.
you're gonna ride yourself against the wall."
No, that's the thing. I ended up with relative energy deficiency in sport, known as
Mm.
REDS, an eating disorder form 2-3 years ago now. And that was because I didn't, one hand, I struggled to understand fueling and everything like that. And that's a sort of co-occurring thing with being autistic, is if the eating disorders come with it, unfortunately. But also at the same time, I knew I was overtraining, but I couldn't stop. It was almost a thing of, if I've got something on the plan, I couldn't phone my coach up and say, look, I need to do a recovery ride. I was so sort of focused. I was like, I've got to go out and do this 4-hour ride I've been set, even if I sort of knew in the back of my mind I shouldn't be doing this. And it's all that sort of thing that's much harder. And I think it's hard for any athlete. But throw in something that makes you very, very driven and very narrowly driven, it becomes very difficult to sort of go, actually, no, we need to change the plan and change what we're doing. Which I also think is why I've ended up being ill and injured throughout my career. And it's almost taken a big injury for me to realise, oh gosh, when I come back from this, I need to do things differently and be much more careful with what I do. But yeah.
Yeah, it's the women's cycling peloton is already prone to red S, and especially if there's like, well, how to say it, like there's no switch or something, like okay, I need to take rest, it's just like I need to go, then evidently you're more prone to these kind of risks in the peloton too. Yeah. That's for sure. And is I can imagine it's not always easy to deal with with that diagnosis, because for you it's normal, you're just you, and then all of a sudden you get kind of a label on you as like, huh, what happens? Is it like, is cycling a help in difficult times for you? Can you just like distract your mind and then go all out in cycling?
Yeah, that's something in the last sort of 10 months of being injured, I've really realised it's not, it's almost been my sort of form of therapy that suddenly overnight, in this case, sort of stopped. And it was this sort of absolute eye opener of this has kept me going. And even though I've had other things, I've never been a full-time athlete up until this year, but obviously currently I'm full-time, but not actually riding a bike. But it's one of these really weird things that it's almost given me a purpose without me potentially realizing that it had done so. And I think possibly if I'd not done cycling, I might have been picked up earlier. As at school, it was almost a bit like, oh, she's a bit weird, she's a bit different, doesn't quite fit in. But she does all this thing, cycling stuff outside of school, and almost assuming that I could cope because I was having to miss school to go off to raid Nations Cups as junior and stuff like that. So I think it has definitely helped me by giving me a purpose and an outlook, and almost, it does get me out the door, it gets me doing stuff. And it also, I struggle quite with social interactions and meeting new people. Whereas with cycling, I could go out on a ride and end up chatting to anybody. I don't have that sort of stress that I have if I meet someone I know in the street unplanned. If I was like walking along to the station, perhaps. So it's definitely gives me this sort of confidence and almost this sort of, I'm a cyclist, everyone else is a cyclist, everyone's nice. So I sort of get that massive boost both mentally but also socially.
Yeah, so you're kind of a different person when you hop on the bike.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of it's a sort of therapy.
I know it definitely
Even.
is. Like that's the best way to describe it. It becomes a form of therapy for me, which is really good.
Yeah, sure. And then we already talked about some pros and cons of being diagnosed with autism and being an athlete. So you're the model athlete until you have the risk for being overtrained, of course. But are there any other pros and cons as an athlete, you think?
Yeah, I think it's everything like training camp first, first training camp of the season. It's never knowing, do I tell people, do I not tell people, do I let people figure out for themselves? If I tell people, how are they going to react? It's all that sort of thing. And I think in the UK, understanding around autism, especially in women, is improving, but it's not improved enough. So that's probably the best way to put it. But I have no idea. I'm riding on a multinational team. I have no idea what people's preconceptions are. So I don't know whether sometimes is it best to tell them, is it best to not try and tell them? So all that sort of thing. And I can go completely mute. I can just stop talking. I can get really emotional if I get burnt out. And it goes back to that balancing the risks of burning out. It's almost, if I avoid the risk of burning out, it doesn't become so obvious per se. Whereas if I am burnt out, having a meltdown, a shutdown, then everybody by default around me is going to know there's something odd. Not that it necessarily is odd, because that's just how my brain reacts, but odd in terms of what is seen as, so-called normal. So I think it definitely, the higher up the sport I go, the almost the harder it becomes, because the environment becomes more pressured. It's that sort of, you're in a professional environment, so it's, do you tell your colleagues? Do you not? So I think that's all a massive effect. And I mean, it also comes down to my racing. If I'm happy and confident, I always race better. And you can sort of go back through my results. A lot of the sort of ones where I've had disasters and things like that have been when I've been incredibly stressed or I've been struggling to even speak. There is a pattern when I sit and go through them. It's, oh yeah, but I was tired then, I was mentally burned out, incredibly stressed. It is quite an interesting sort of pattern of results, so to speak. And when I've done well, I've always been in an environment with people that I felt completely happy with, completely trust, and I'm open with, essentially.
Yeah, it's more extreme, the good and the bad results, or the good and the bad form, as we can say, because obviously when for all of us, when things go well, when we're happy, things go smoothly. But I can imagine that it's more extreme for you, like it goes very well or it goes pretty bad.
Yeah.
That depending, yeah. Uh-huh. And on top of that, Connie, you're now currently dealing with a long-term knee injury. What exactly happened?
I had a big crash a year ago in a UK national. I landed knee first into the back of another rider. And initially it was sort of assumed that I'd dislocated my knee and it'd gone back in, but everything was going to be all right. Sort of had treatment, was still able to ride the bike, was still able to do a few kermesses and sort of shorter races. And it all been fine. I came back and raced the two Morbihan races, the GP Morbihan, Classic Morbihan, and they went well. They did my job for the team, everything. And I'm sort of there like, it still doesn't feel right. Like something is up. Went back, Saw a doctor who was like, no, I think it's still just healing. Okay, keep going with the physio treatment. It'll be fine. Keep riding. And I sort of thought in the back of my head, something doesn't feel right, but I didn't feel pain. And the alarm bells with me for that should have been in 2018. I broke my back as a junior, and I ended up in the same situation where I just was like, my back's not right, but it's not painful. And people were like, oh, it's just bruised. And it turned out I had 2 fractures in my disc and another disc that was out of place. And we only realised when I suddenly woke up in extreme pain, and my spine had sort of got this sort of swollen lump over the top of it. And it turned out I'd basically broken the vertebrae in this crash. And I sort of thought my knee didn't feel right, but I kept riding. I raced Ride London, and then it wasn't okay. And someone I know, not from cycling, because it was near where I live, had come out to watch. And at the finish of stage 2, I said to him, I was like, I don't think my knee's right. And he'd known me back when I was like the kid who'd done a back, and he was like, I think you probably need to get that checked, Connie. And I sort of was like, oh no, it's fine. And then the next day it still wasn't right. And basically I went in, then carried on, sort of rested for a week, then went into Tour of Britain, and I was actually having quite a good ride. I'd been in a break, and I was actually riding relatively all right for the team, doing my job and everything like that. And about 40k to go, I came over the radio and I just went, Colin, my knee's not right. Like, I'm in an awful lot of pain. And the next hour, it just became unbearable. So I finished, climbed off, got sent straight home, was in hospital on that Monday for tests. And that's where it all started unraveling on MRI scans, that I'd done a long list of injuries to tendons, bones, everything in my knee, the fat pad. It was more of a case of what haven't I injured, which sort of then links back to the sort of autism, because one of the things that people don't understand is it affects how your pain receptors work. So for me, I'm able to almost deal with major trauma quite well. So it's like I came around from having open knee surgery and I was like, oh no, I'm not in pain. And I sort of withdrew myself from painkillers really quickly. And it was a bit like, how have you done, how are you okay? But yet sometimes I get a tiny paper cut and I'm convinced that I'm dying and it's really, really bad. But that is something that people don't necessarily know links to it, as your brain just doesn't fire the right pain receptors. So our current problem now with it is working out whether the pain I'm in doesn't quite match the MRI scan that's quite good. So it's now sort of the other way round of trying to work out whether my brain is misfiring and saying this is painful when actually there's nothing majorly wrong anymore. And all my tendons and everything are in the right place and they've healed. So it's sort of trying to work out what's nerve misfiring and what's pain, which was the initial problem originally, because I wasn't in pain, but was going, my knee's still swollen and I don't feel quite right. But yeah, so that's the sort of long story short, basically, or as short as I can make it.
Oh, yeah. What a story.
Yeah.
So you thought it was just an itch, but it seemed a little bit different.
Yeah, it was all swollen and I thought, oh, it's just bruised, go with it. It's just where the kneecap got displaced and popped back in and it's all going to be fine. And no, 2 months later, it was really not fine on a scan.
Yeah. And do you have already sights on a possible comeback, Connie?
We're being realistic. I'm saying train hard over the winter and start 26. That is where my eyes are. Anything before that is a bonus. I would like at least to come back for some of the track stuff, either at the end of summer or over winter. Track is something that I really, really enjoy, but I've sort of put aside a little bit and sort of focused on the road. But I think my best road season was the year that I combined it with a lot of track. So I want to do the stuff that I enjoy basically, and I'm sort of like, if I have to have a year out of this sport, I want to come back and do everything for me. As again, I think that's something that at times in the last couple of years I'd sort of was almost chasing a dream too much, whilst not realizing the sport around me was changing and everything like that. And I was sort of so focused on numbers, results, but then in the process, races that I'd go in and target, I'd then end up crashing out of and things like that because I was so pumped up basically. I wasn't concentrating on things. I ended up in a ditch at one point for no obvious reason other than me basically riding my head down and sort of being right, I need to get ready to attack at the next climb in 5k to go. I need to move up somehow, and then dong, I'm in a ditch. So I think, it's anything before 26 is a bonus, but 26 is definitely where we're heading. I saw my consultant yesterday and he's sort of saying, I've no doubts for next year, but I think given the amount of time you've had off, even if they get me back training in the next 3 weeks, as at the minute, it's just sort of something that could, they've got to work out, is it my brain? And the little bit of information that is left, they've no idea how long it's going to take for that to settle. Could be a couple of weeks, could be a couple of months sort of thing. It's that sort of time frame. So anything before 26 is a bonus. Probably won't be particularly fit, but if you get to start and ride an hour, say, for the team, then that is a massive bonus. But at the minute, in my head, it's all eyes on 26 and beyond, basically.
Mhm. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
And believe in yourself, Connie.
Yeah.
Really. And well, we talked about it briefly already before, that cycling is like therapy and escape for you. So how difficult is it? How do you cope with it right now, as being out of cycling for so long? I can imagine it's not quite easy.
No, it's definitely not been easy. And I think it's never easy for any athlete. But I think I'm sort of at the age where a lot of people might have used it as an excuse to walk away, and sort of been told, you've got to have basically a year out to let this heal and settle and everything like that. And I think a lot of people probably would have walked away and gone and done something else and moved on with their lives. I'm the person who sort of keeps wanting reassurance from doctors, going, I will be able to ride a bike again, right, sort of thing. And they keep going, yes, we've already told you that. And I keep asking it, because in my head I'm thinking, oh my God, is there a way back from this? What am I going to do with my life? But I've got a very good team around me. I've seen a very, very good sports doctor who has essentially kept me going, and sort of has had to be the one who's going, you'll be fine, just keep doing what you're doing, sort of thing. So I've been very lucky in that respect, but it's been very difficult. And it's one of these things where it comes and goes. I think after the initial operation, it almost felt easier because it was sort of like, oh, the op's done, we should be back. And then there's sort of been a couple of setbacks, a couple of other things found that needed more time. And that's sort of been harder when there's been no sort of time frame for anything moving forward. It's sort of like, this is the treatment plan for the foreseeable future until there's a change. And it's waiting for that change that's been quite mentally difficult. As I'm someone who, if you have a broken collarbone, you're usually, you're allowed back on the bike in X amount of weeks. And it's quite a standard procedure. There's a lot of other people around you that have had that. The list of injuries I've had together, there's very few people, I think there's probably nobody in cycling who's had the list together at one hit. And there is a few other people that I've managed to be put in touch with, who are mostly from other sports like football, which has been a massive help. And sort of knowing that I'm not the only person going through this sort of temporary loss of your sport and your life. Which I think cycling, obviously a lot of cycling injuries are just pure bone. Mine was not just bone alone, although was an aspect within it. So I think there's not the injury culture you see in, say, football, where everybody knows somebody who's had a soft tissue knee injury. Whereas cycling, it's almost, people have had them, but it's quite hush hush, don't talk about it. You don't want teams to know you've had periods of time out and stuff like that. So that's been quite difficult, the sort of feeling that I'm quite alone with it. But there's another Conti rider who's been out for long term with her. She's had a hip problem, and that's been quite nice seeing her get back riding and knowing that should be me soon, and sort of having somebody else who's a little bit further along in their recovery journey, albeit with a different injury, to sort of think, right, it'll be okay because she's back. But it has been really, really difficult, and knowing, what to do and not to do as well, sort of thing. And, I don't know, I want to go and watch races, but at the same time, like, oh, is that the right thing to do for my mental health? Or is that going to make me feel even more sad? So it's just not been a particularly nice time, but I've managed to sort of find ways to get through it and navigate it with the right support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And then what are you currently focusing on? That
Currently at the minute it's just a lot of physio and rehab, sort of living my life around a physio plan, and that's sort of my main drive. I'm also waiting back to potentially be doing a PhD, waiting back to hear about funding for that sort of thing in the UK is very competitive, and that's why I've never been a full-time rider, because I don't never like it when I have sort of had periods out of education. I'm always a bit lost of what do I do. I'm just riding my bike every day, whereas I'm sort of someone who likes to come home from do a 4-hour ride in the morning and come back and then work for a few hours. I finished a master's last year, and that was a sort of massive help at the sort of beginning of my injury because I had something else to do. And same with the sort of applying to get PhD funding. It gave me something to do that wasn't cycling related, and I could almost switch off, hyper focus on something else. So that's always been my sort of, as much as I'd love to be full time for the sort of physical benefit, more rest and everything like that, I get quite bored being sat around. It's also that thing of, if there is a period of time you're out injured, like now I'd taken a year out from university and I'm now like, oh, I'm literally living my life around physio. So it's not particularly fun for my brain, hence why I have always been at uni whilst I've raced my bike.
yeah, that's for sure.
And then maybe we'll go over your team for a bit, because your team is very passionate about supporting neurodivergent athletes. What's it like to ride for a team like this?
Yeah, I think O'Shea Racing, we've got a very open approach, all about keeping riders racing, supporting riders who might not necessarily have the financial support. So that's one of the big things, is trying to help people. Cycling is such an incredibly expensive sport, and it does become a very unfair ladder. I mean, even within the Conti teams, I think they're quite restricted on what they can do, because obviously we haven't got the budget there that, say, the bigger World Tour teams, but also sort of like the Volker Wessels, for example, the pro Conti teams have got in resource. But they're very, very, very supportive of riders of difference. I'm one of many riders on the team who are neurodivergent in some form. So they're very passionate about making sure, riders are happy and enjoying the sport, because that's the main thing at the end of the day. You're never going to get results if you're not enjoying it. So I think that's the sort of big thing of, let's take riders who other teams might not necessarily sort of think will be able to get results, or might think, oh, they might be a bit too much hard work. Whereas I think O'Shea have got a very, it's almost open approach where they don't look at anything like that, and just accept people for who they are as a rider. So I think that then makes the team sort of work. As people know, you can be open with others because they've got similar challenges and similar differences going on. So it's probably the best way to try and put it. It's almost something that doesn't bother the team, and then by it not bothering the team, it becomes an inclusive environment. The same with any form of difference, basically.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, you're a pretty small continental team. How does the environment affect you?
I think it's difficult. We've not got a massive, works both ways. We've not got a massive list of staff. And obviously I haven't really raced this year, obviously. So sort of not experienced, there's been some changes over the winter. People have come and gone and new people have come in. So looking back to last year, essentially, it was quite nice because we had a really good management, who were able to sort of use what they had, essentially, and at the same time really support riders with challenges. I mean, I remember I had a complete disaster at Normandy last year, and our director sportif last year, Ollie Moores, literally spent 3 hours on the phone to me before Depana, in a bid to get my head back in the game, because I was just so upset from what had happened at the weekend and just couldn't cope. And then I went to Depana and actually did my job for the team and did everything I was supposed to and rode quite well. And it was that sort of having staff like Ollie who will go and put spend hours talking to a rider and helping them out of a situation and believing in them, which I think is always really important. You need staff who believe in you, which I think is something we've managed, or at least in my experience of the team, have always done by having a small cohort of staff. Everyone knows everybody. But obviously that brings challenges because you've not got the big setup that the World Tour, the Pro Conti teams, and even some of the bigger continental teams when they're linked to a World Tour team have. And the UK teams, there's quite a few have gone UCI in recent years, but it's almost they've gone UCI to have an escape from the British racing scene, which has really declined. But we probably in reality don't really have the finances to really be a proper continental team. So that obviously brings swings and roundabouts. You're getting to go to the races, you're getting to race, but at the same time you've got your own personal spur bike on the car, for example. You've not got a team spur. So all that sort of thing is then a challenge. It's more stress for the rider, but at the same time you're getting the opportunity to go to Europe and show yourself and ride those races, but you're aware that you don't have the setup that some of the bigger teams, the development teams have. So that sort of conflict, but at the same time, by being smaller, you've got staff that know every rider inside out. You're much more close knit. You're almost like a bit of a sort of team family, so to speak, which is quite nice, especially for someone like me who might not necessarily cope on a bigger team where sort of staff are coming in and out. So yeah, it's one of these things that it's brilliant for giving you the opportunity, and it's brilliant for everyone being so close and knowing each other, but it obviously does make things harder as you don't have the resource essentially.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you think the wider peloton is doing enough to support neurodivergent athletes?
I want to say no. I'm aware of riders who have had difficulties on World Tour teams. I know of a World Tour men's team treating a rider really badly because he was neurodivergent, which then led him to quit the top of the sport. And that's all in the last 10 years. And I don't think it's changing from what I can see and what I've heard from other people and my own experiences. But I don't know whether that's necessarily a cycling problem or a wider society problem, which I think isn't helped by cycling being such an intense environment. It's almost seen as a bit of a weakness, and it's an excuse for teams, not to put the effort in to help somebody when there's so many other riders of similar level they could just swap in who might be deemed as easier to manage, more straightforward and things like that. So I think there needs to be an understanding. On the same time, you've got some brilliant people. I mean, you've got Voiters at EF, who's quite passionate about it due to his own diagnosis, who I do think is raising awareness by talking about it. So you have got people like him who are doing a really good job. But I do feel on the whole, sport, society and cycling, sort of all three in wider context, are facing challenges that need to be addressed to become inclusive and accepting environments for all athletes, and then to get the best out of individuals.
Mm-hmm. Can it also be that like the environment is not aware enough how to say it, how to react and how to deal with people that have been diagnosed with that like you? Because I can imagine like, okay, it comes in for normal people like, whoa, what is this? And maybe they don't know how to handle it or don't know how to deal. So maybe there should be a little bit more awareness, a little bit more like, how do you say it, like a guide. How can you respond to it, or how can you deal with it too? Because it's not only Connie who got the diagnosis, but your environment too. They need to understand like, hey, you should be doing this or that in certain situations. And I think that's something that lacks a lot in society, and not only in cycling, I think, right?
Oh no, definitely. I think there's a lack of awareness, and people think they know what autism is from either courses that are aimed at small young boys. The sort of understanding of it in adults, and then adult women in particular, is really, really lacking. And I think the only way you can change that is by giving people like myself, and there's other riders out there who are diagnosed but maybe less public, giving us a platform to explain our experience and explain how we want to be helped. And I know Colin Sturgis, who's involved in my team, for example, he's openly neurodivergent, albeit in a very different way to me. But he's someone who always asks me what's best, what's best to help you. And I remember before Tour of Britain, I basically said to him, this is how, this is what I want, sort of thing, from support to him and Ollie. And that day at TOB that my knee went, I'd actually been riding really well because I had complete faith in the team car understanding me. And the night before the race, I was really happy and felt really supportive and really included. So I think you need more people with understanding, and also goes both ways. Like, as I said, Colin's neurodivergent. He's a brilliant, brilliant DS, but you need to keep more people like him in the sport to then be able to help the younger talent coming through who are neurodivergent. Because I think without neurodivergent role models and without neurodivergent team managers, we're never going to see a change. And no amount of people could go and do a course, but the courses and stuff like that are often aimed, especially those in the UK, are all aimed very much at young 5-year-old boys whose experience of life is obviously going to be very, very different to mine at 24 as an autistic woman. So I think no amount of sort of education within coaching, and this is talking from a UK perspective, is really going to help. It needs to be team managers, DSs, listening to neurodivergent riders and neurodivergent sports people, because sport as a whole, it's a problem, not just in cycling. And I think you need to give us a voice to talk about it, to explain what helps, what doesn't help. So like with me, I really struggle with really specific demands. So if you'd said to me, you need to attack in the last hour of a race, I'd find that really, really difficult, because I'd be spending the whole time thinking I've got to attack 60 minutes to go and work it out in my head and doing the maths and like really weird stuff like that. But I'd be so focused on that. That's where then I've missed splits and ended up in the second group and stuff like that, because I'm literally so focused on what is being asked. To think in part, my form of autism sort of overlaps this thing called pathological demand avoidance, which sounds really dramatic, but it's not. It's essentially extreme anxiety around a demand. So with me, I'm best of, I remember before stage 1 at TOB, Colin just said to me, have some fun. Go out, have some fun. That was the only demand that was on me. And that's basically what I did. I spent most of the day at the front of the bunch. I was making moves, albeit moves that possibly weren't going to get anywhere, but we're going to get a small Conti team on telly, which was a massive aim for us that week. And I did my job, because the job was almost it was really open and left it down to me. There was no, I want you to attack up that hill with 30k to go, because otherwise I'd spent the whole entire race stressing about that and probably would be absolutely useless and sort of get in the way of my teammates, sort of thing, in sort of mad panic. So you need people to understand and to listen to the neurodivergent riders, and then from there we can have a more inclusive sport, because it's led by the individuals who need the support, essentially. I think you're not going to get the support unless you get the voices listened to, is my view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, great advice actually for all teams and team management. I suggest now we will go to the latest news, and then we'll continue this conversation a bit further. But in latest news, of course, we had the Holy Week here in Flanders last week. Starting with Dwars door Vlaanderen, actually. I was there. Let's say the start and the middle of the race was very fun for me. Let's say from 25 kilometers from the finish, I have looked happier. For people who saw the picture pass on Instagram, people were bothering me, mainly people who have unreal expectations of Lotte Kopecky, who then feel like they need to bash her for becoming second in Dwars door Vlaanderen. So I was watching with some commentary, not gonna call names because if you listened, you know who I'm talking about. We immediately went, she overtraining, and she won't be bullshit, just bullshit. Anyway, I've just put it off, and I tried to stay calm, but you know, at the buses, I just failed. I did it at the podium at the finish, and then there was some guy coming to me. Oh, she didn't win, and now she goes straight in the bus. She doesn't take time for the fans, and I just said, obviously way too loud, like, did you ever realize that respect is more important than what you want? So yeah, that was just a little stronger than me. But apart from that, I think it was a pretty nice race. We of course saw that Lot was not at her best there yet, but if we look a little bit further, it was just a bit of an off day. But yeah, off day if you become second, is it an off day? Maybe, but so we had that. Then of course we had Longoborghini winning with an attack. Also something I found quite remarkable was to see Casia being really upfront. Okay, she couldn't really follow the attack, but like Dwars of Vlaanderen is not really the race. You'd say like, oh, this is a race for Casia. So I was quite surprised by that. So yeah, we also saw, but Pietersen was also pretty good there. And of course, we had last minute. We saw Marianne Vos at DNS because she was starting to feel a little ill. But I think that's the main thing that
And then
happened there.
we had Lippert already at 6th, showing that she was capable of something bigger in Tour of Flanders. Yeah. And you forgot, Saar, but this is my weekly Team Cooper Repsol point. Sigrid Haus had finished 11th in Dwars door Vlaanderen,
Oh yeah,
which is
that's
quite
pretty
remarkable.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Just had to put that in.
Yeah. And then we had on Saturday, if I'm correct, Volta Next Classic, which Gerrit won. Again, as he works, but not with the as he works clothing on, because she was racing with the Dutch team. Before Meike Uiterwijk, and then on 3 Lonneke Uneke. So that was on Saturday race, and then we'll just talk about what we are looking forward to the most: Tour of Flanders.
National holiday in Flanders.
Yeah. It was actually the first time I was in Oudenaarde. The years before I was on the Oude Kwaremond, but it was all the time so buzzy, and the shuttles and all the waiting with chronic illness and chronic pain would not recommend. A lot of tears I have had there, so this year I was not gonna do it like that. We're gonna park it somewhere and then we'll just bike to Oudenaarde. And it was way better because honestly, the first Tour of Flanders in I guess 4 years, I didn't left crying, so guess that's something. But it was actually pretty nice. Also, the crowds at the start already for the women, it was super impressive. So that was super nice. And then of course the race started. Sadly, we had lots of crashes. With them, we had Elisa Longoborghini, who afterwards we know she had a pretty bad concussion. But she
Crash.
yeah, but she got on her bike again, which clearly wasn't a very good idea. The team
Adrenaline
had
takes
to,
over.
yeah. So that was not the best thing, but luckily she eventually listened to the team to get off the bike.
And luckily, the team gave her the advice to
Yeah,
drop off the bike,
indeed.
because that's 50-50 too.
Yeah,
Like some teams would say,
for
like,
sure.
nah, just go on. We'll see after the race. So
Mhm.
good job by the team.
Yeah. And sadly, one of our guests also crashed, Mieke.
Again, Mieke.
Luck is not on our side lately, but the luck will come hopefully. Also, the manifesting Margot to Flanders top 10. Yeah. But,
Well, we should
we
start the
saw...
movement earlier next year, Sarah. We might have been a little bit too late. That might have
Yeah.
infected Margot's final results. Yeah.
But we saw with my Lotte predictions, it also took 3 times. So maybe we just need to wait a couple of races and we'll see her in the top 10.
It's easy predicting Lotte when my number 1 was out with a concussion, Sarah. Meh.
You predicted Lorena Wiebes for Gent Wevelgang, so...
Yeah, true.
But then the race, we had a break. Probably the biggest name was Nicole Steginger. I think Sales also mentioned her in What to Look Out For the coming years again. She rode a pretty good race, I think. She went quite far, actually. And then, of course, like, I think the race really started to take off around Koppenberg, with already Lot Kopecky and Puk Pietersen on the front row.
A lot of
And
walking
then...
again on the Koppenberg, by the way. That there was in more at the back of the peloton. There was again some walking, and then people who are badly positioned. Then race was over already. So yeah, that's opening up the discussion again. Is Koppenberg really needed for the women's race at that place in the race? Anyway, go on, Sar.
And now I really have to start to think, because there was like this little boy in a Lotte Kopecky jersey asking me all the questions possible from that point. So I was like, I want to watch. So then maybe what really was remarkable for me is great teamwork by As He Works. I think that's
I have
something
to admit.
we can really say, like, this season their teamwork is really on point, even with Anna van der Breggen too. So you had, if we call them the big three from SD Works, they were all there. We had Wiebes the whole day actually trying to keep Lotte in a good position. So that was great to see. We also had Bredold reacting on a couple of attacks, one with Royster, if I'm correctly. And also Anna van der Breggen. Nice seeing her control, keeping the pace. So I was, it was nice to see that, actually.
It sucks,
really...
Sar. It sucks. I don't have anything to laugh at now that the team tactics are going good with SD Works. I mean, come on, give me something.
But yeah, for Christoph it sucks. I was happy to see it last Sunday. And then I think in the leaders group, I think one name really surprised me and another also surprised me. I think Liane Lippert. I have said it so many times, actually, from before the season and the start of the season. Oh, I hope she's gonna find her form back, because Tour de France Femme is looking like a couple of good stages for her, and seems like it's finally happening again, because she was in the leaders group at the Tour of Flanders. That was like, whoa, I didn't really see that going.
Didn't expect her in the Flemish Classics to be so close. Yeah.
And then Pauline Ferrand-Prévot also, of course, she was so showing she's very good again, but still, if we think about how long she was out of the road peloton and just comes, Tour of Flanders, let me get second. I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, she keeps amazing this spring. Yeah.
And I think Nivea Doma, if we saw a race in Dwarfs of Vlaanderen, we could expect her to be in the front. And then, yeah, same
I think she was.
Lotte,
I think she was
actually
cooked, by the way, near the finish line, because we all know Kasia is not, the racehorse in the sprint. Let's put it that way. So the fact she didn't try any escape or any attack in the final situation, I think she was pretty cooked, and she was already happy to be at the front group, I think.
But it was a good reaction, right? Sad to say, I'm still not a sprinter, so...
She knows who she is. That's important in life.
Yeah. And then I think it was a pretty clear win by Lotte. I was at 100 meters from the finish, so it was pretty stressing. You could have probably heard that if you listened to the video. I
Just put
do.
it on mute if you listen to it.
Yeah, don't put it too loud because, yeah, it was loud. So super, super nice to see that actually.
Did Lotte
Then
sweat and suffer at all during the race, you think, Sarah? Because that jersey and white pants with the rainbow stripes, they looked pretty white at the finish. I was like, where have you been?
a lot better than last year.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So yeah, it was a great race, I think.
Kim LeCour, 5th.
Yeah.
She's is that now the end of Kim LeCour's spring, or do you expect her to continue for the dance? Or will it now be like,
If she's
that's
riding,
it for the spring?
no, if she's riding, I think she will be up there, like doing top 10s. I see that happening, but I don't know really her program, so question marks.
Good
But
question.
of course, we know if it's Holy Week in Flanders, you can already guess I'm gonna come with a rant. So for Flemish people, we had the famous Vive le Vélo. It's like this talk show where maybe one question gets asked about women's cycling and all the rest of it is going to men's cycling. But in one of the episodes, there even was someone who is like the women's cycling expert on Flemish TV. And the first question was, doesn't it hurt when women's cycling finally gets the attention to see they don't deliver? And I was like, what the hell is this? And there was like,
destroy everything that has been built up just with one sentence on national TV. Yeah, good job.
and I was like, whoa. So that was like, yeah, what's the problem?
The problem was not in the question, Sarah. The problem was in
Yeah.
the really mild response to the
Yeah.
question from one of the women cycling analysts.
Yeah,
Like,
I was
okay.
like, isn't this like literally your job to like react like this? Like, what are you saying? They are racing, because there's this weird misconception about women cycling that they need to prove themselves every time they race. Like, oh no, it was a sprinting and oh no, they didn't deliver, they failed. I am sorry, but are you watching men's cycling? Here you have a solo from Mats Pedersen, here you have a solo from Mathieu van der Poel, here you have a solo from Tadej Pogacar. I mean, are they also failing to deliver?
No,
So
they deliver, Sarah.
so I was like, what an odd question, and what a, yeah, I won't call it a response. And then it became even better because it was just for before Dwars door Vlaanderen, and they were talking about what Wiebe's role would be, and that Lotte Kopecky should give her one more time to win, so she would certainly work for Lotte the coming races. One thing, it doesn't work like that as he works. And second thing, Wiebes wasn't even riding. So anyways.
Well informed, well informed.
Belgium media.
Yeah, but then you saw in the breakaway during Tour of Flanders on the Sportza website as well. We had, like, for example, April Tacey. She was apparently riding for Life Plus Wahoo. It's her second year with Team Coop Repsol, and just a gentle reminder that Life Plus Wahoo is not in business anymore. But hey,
And on the live
anyway.
figure, there were also Brett de Grave was also not even mentioned. So
she was from a Flemish team actually. So
yeah,
we kindly forget her. She's not there.
So yeah. It's like, I love the classics, but you just really get that extra confrontation with Belgian media. You think, oh, how good would it be if I could switch off this? But we had the Holy Week. Now, of course, this week we have the Scheldeprijs coming up. And on Saturday, Paris-Roubaix. We'll keep Paris-Roubaix for the second episode actually this week, because there's another one coming up, but because we of course can't skip a prediction, our good predictions. We will preview the Scheldeprijs and also do our very well predictions. So probably the main thing for the Scheldeprijs is Wiebes, who won 4 times in a row, is not starting because she wants to be fresh for Roubaix on Saturday. But we have some other fast riders starting. I don't know how the wind is, but I think we can expect a sprint. So
Yeah, if you
we
stay
have
upright
Balsamo
on the
and
cobbles,
Cole. Yeah, we have
yeah,
Balsamo and Cole starting. So I would be surprised to see there won't be a sprint. Consoni.
possibly.
Then a question maybe you'd like to answer because you're so good at it, Christoph. For who are they gonna go as they were? It's Femke Gerrits or Barbara Guarici?
Yeah, just pick the opposite one from what I'm saying. I don't know. I go for Guarici again.
At the moment, Gerritsen has number 1, so.
Yeah, that's for
I'm
distraction.
also seeing Marie Schreiber
Yeah.
on the participants list at the moment, so maybe this will be her debut race. We have Maggie Coles-Lister, who's back after illness.
Great to see her back. She struggled a
Yeah,
bit.
for sure. Julie de Wilde is there too for Belgium perspective. We also have Coponi, Georgia Baker,
Jackson.
yes. Not that she's gonna win the sprint, but Alzini,
Mika.
Charlotte Sauren. Yeah, Mika, of course, but I didn't knew it was on the program actually. So I don't know. Do you need a Coop Repsol shout out too, or?
Yeah, team got confirmed. So Laura Lisette Sander is racing again. It's Camila Ronosbie, Eline van Rooyen maybe in the sprint for a top 10 place. Yeah, cross fingers.
So yeah, honestly, Scheldeprijs is like not really a race. You can say too much about it. The chances are pretty big. We'll see an early break and then a sprint. So
they called it in the past a mini Paris-Roubaix, but that's like
what?
Yeah. It's
I
they
was
call it
not
like
aware.
or the exam, the second exam after Paris-Roubaix is at Scheldeprijs, but like yeah, that's probably a little bit getting too excited about the parkour of Scheldeprijs anyway. I mean, there are some nasty cobbled sections, but hey, come on, it's not Carrefour de l'Arbre or anything near like that. So it's usually a sprinter's exam if you keep it upright on the
but
cobbled
it will
sections.
be a little more exciting since Wiebes is not starting. So
generally the case, sadly.
So I think we can go over to predictions. I don't know, does someone want to start? I can start, but
Go.
first time in 4 weeks actually. I'm not saying not to Kopecky, so be excited about it.
You have no other choice.
I'm going with Balsamo on 1, Georgia Baker on 5, and Maggie Coles-Lister on 10.
Nice. I go for Cole. This is flat. This is at sea, racing at sea level. She's capable of finishing this one off. At 5, I go for Julie de Wilde. And at 10, I go for Josie Nelson.
Nice. Connie, do you want to
Yeah.
go do 2? You don't have to if you don't want to, or you can just do the winner. No worries.
Balsamo for the win. Go Maggie Coles-Lister for 5th. and a complete wild card, Sonara Grove from O'Shea for 10th. She's a good sprinter, but yeah, I have to say.
Okay.
Nice.
Nice. We'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah, we should now that we had an O'Shea guest.
Yeah,
We should.
Yeah.
she won the South African National Championships a few weeks back, so sort of rolling on a high. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
throw her in as a wild card.
Great. I think we can wrap this latest news part up here. And we'll go back to the questions again. So Connie, do you have any hobbies or interests besides cycling?
So obviously I did a master's that I finished last summer. Before that, I was at uni doing a degree. So did a bachelor's. I finished in 22. And that's a sort of big, academia has always been a big interest of mine. My research, well, my master's was a research master's. So I did a lot of research looking at around the autistic experience of navigating cities in the UK. And that was something I got really into. So I guess that's a sort of interest. And I've always had an interest in other sports. And as a child, I did a lot of horse riding, and we've still got my old pony from when I was a kid. So I guess he's also a sort of glorified pet and also an interest. He's quite a nice distraction to have from the current knee situation. To just be able to go and spend time with an animal is always quite nice. So I guess that's my other sort of thing in my life, I guess to say.
Nice. And then there are, of course, these two questions we did come back every episode. How do you think women's cycling has evolved in recent years?
Oh, it's massive. The difference in standard and the difference in support is huge. I remember 2021, I raced my first World Tour race at the Tour of Britain. And yeah, the big teams had a lot of gear, they had a lot of bikes, but it was still nowhere near that of a men's. You turn up in a car park for a women's World Tour race and it was nowhere near the amount of buses, equipment that you see in the men's World Tour. And now, almost on that sort of front, it's pretty equal between the men's and the women's. At the top of the pyramid, at least. So the top of the pyramid has caught up, I'd say, with men's cycling, and almost in some ways has overtaken it. With the races being that bit shorter, the racing is more exciting. It is a better watch, even if some media outlets don't necessarily appreciate that. So it is definitely growing really rapidly at the top. How sustainable the pyramid is a bit of a different matter. And I'd probably say the Conti scene, okay, you've got the arrival of the new development teams. That's obviously improved some aspects of it. But you're still, the 1.1s, the 1.2s, there's not the strength and the depth in support, equipment, money that there is at the top by any means. Nor is there parity with what a men's Conti team have, for example. But I think on the whole, if you're looking at the more of the World Tour stuff, the improvement is massive in just sort of 4 or 5 years. The sort of post-COVID era. I was looking at photos the other day from, I think it was the 2018 Tour of Britain that come up on Instagram. And I was just like, the sort of organisation of riders and the clear sort of team dynamics is completely different now to what it was then, which is absolutely brilliant to see. But we just need to make sure the sport is moving in the right direction and with no gaps left in the pyramid, because I don't think you can have a strong top without a good bottom of the sport. So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned it and described it here perfectly, but what still needs to improve in women's cycling apart from that?
I think the big thing is the money outside of the World Tour, and almost not rushing everything too much. I know Natasha Van Alden, I can never say her name, Britt Narvan's mum. She's someone who says it as it is and says it absolutely spot on. You can't build a house without the foundations. And I do worry at the minute we're working on the roof without working on the foundations of the sport. And I think, especially in the UK, it's not helped with a lot of the very talented juniors are just going straight into the World Tour. So that sort of Conti element and even the pro Conti ranks is sort of almost in existence, but it's not very appreciated. So like if you take football, looking at the UK sort of football scene, you've obviously got the Premier League, and then all the tiers below are sort of organised in their own right. Cycling, it feels like there's the World Tour, and then everything else just sort of is there. There's not necessarily any structure to the Conti system. The way races are organised, you don't know as a Conti team if you're going to get in every single 1.1, because some 1.1s have a field like Scale de Priest on Wednesday has got a very, very good field for this race classification. So it's sort of all that sort of thing almost needs a bit of a relook, in my opinion, to make sure that we grow the sport at the right rate, and don't try and match the men when the men have taken 50 years to get to where they are now. Whereas it feels like with women's cycling, it's just sort of let's get it to the same standard as the men's as quickly as we possibly can, increase the race distances, everything like that, where doesn't feel like there's that much joined up thinking. So it's like with the sort of race distances, you take that aspect of it, you can increase the races, but you've still got Conti teams that aren't able to pay riders enough to live off, and aren't able to pay much more than expenses. So for riders, they're not full time. So if you increase the race distance even more, it's going to be very hard for them to do the training that you might necessarily need if you're racing for 5 hours plus. So I think all of that it's all great we're moving in that direction, but at the same time, we almost need to remember we can't catch the men overnight. And we almost need to appreciate women's cycling for what it is. And it's better than men's cycling because races go from the gun. There's none of this sort of easy rolling around like you see in the Tour de France of the men. And that needs to be protected, I think. There's no point making another men's cycling, because men's cycling in a lot of aspects isn't particularly interesting. We need to keep the women's side how it is and as good as it is without trying to become the same as the men, basically.
That's a valid point, Connie. Yeah, and especially also the flow between the junior category and the elite level category is, I think it's too big. I mean, we're not all Cat Fergusons in the peloton who digest this like easily. For the majority, it's a struggle. There's no U23 scene, at least not in Belgium. I don't know how it is in Britain.
It doesn't
Well,
exist in
cycling
the
is in
UK.
shambles a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably you don't have a scene either, so it's a big step. It's okay for the likes of Cat Ferguson. It's like a generational talent, I think. But for the majority, it's very difficult to jump from an 18, 19-year-old to the elite ranks. It's still missing a level in between, I think, that needs to develop first.
No, definitely. I think the juniors going from 80k to suddenly being thrown in, to race 160k plus is crazy. And it's almost this thing of people think, oh, because Cat Ferguson and Imogen Wolf can do it, everyone can. And it's like, no, I think there's still, if you look at Pfeiffer Georgie, her first few years as under 23, she was developing into the rider we see now. And people need to remember that not everyone is Cat Ferguson. And that needs to be remembered when we're looking at developing the sport. I know myself as a rider, I benefit massively from the Waterloo Ladies Challenge for the under 23s, because it was suddenly an opportunity for us under 23s to race with the under 23s. We weren't racing the elites, we weren't racing full-time pros. Most of us were students at uni. And it was a really good level playing field. And that race, I know they've now got L'Avenir, but that race now no longer exists. So it sort of was one step forward, 2 steps back sort of thing. So I think they do need to work on the under 23 category away from the elites whilst working on the elites at the same time sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, because we need to remind the listeners and the viewers that the path of Pfeiffer Georgie is the normal way, like 99% of athletes walk. It's not Cat Ferguson way. That's the exception. Yeah. You should be very well aware of that. It's almost a crime to put a junior racer into a World Tour race of 160K. It's it's too hard, I think.
Mhm. And then something completely different. What's the best thing cycling has brought into your life?
Oh, that's a hard one. I guess both the sense of enjoyment, freedom, but both freedom in terms of going out, exploring roads, seeing new places, racing, training, but also, as I said earlier, the sort of escape from my challenges, socially and everything like that. So I think it's given me an aspect that's sort of double, yeah, it's a double aspect sort of thing where I've got freedom to go and see the world, enjoy myself, exercise, train really hard, and I love that. And then at the same time, it's given me freedom to meet new people, meet new friends, socialize with people that I probably would never have met without cycling. And there's an awful lot of people if I hadn't, I always think if I hadn't pursued the path that I did at sort of 16, 17, there's a whole load of people that I would have never have met, never have come across in my life. And that's like really weird to think about. So I'm really grateful for cycling for giving me that aspect. And that's also why, I'm sort of like, right, this injury is a setback. It's not the end. Because I was literally like, that's why I keep checking with doctors all the time. Because I'm like, I don't want this to be it. And it's not going to be. And I know that. But I always think, oh God, I just don't want it to end now because it's so much fun and the people you meet, and even just like young children coming up and asking for bottles at the end of a race, all that sort of thing is just such a lovely atmosphere that you get at bike races, and even just out on training rides and stuff like that. It's sport's just wonderful, basically.
Brilliant. Good to hear, Connie. Then something completely different. What's your favorite race on the race calendar?
That's hard now, because quite a few of my favourite races have been cancelled. It's like GP Isberge, for example, that's not going ahead this year. That's always a favourite. It would be Ride London, which again isn't happening this year. They're my home roads. It's always on the roads I train on. I have friends and family come out to watch, and that's always really special because it always brings people that I know away from cycling to cycling, and I find that really cool. I remember last year my old PE teacher from school, he brought his children out. He has no interest in cycling, only knows about it through me. And he came out and brought his two kids, and it was just lovely being at that finish and seeing him and chatting and other people that I know how on the roads watching who would never, usually, especially in Britain, because we have Tour of Britain this year and usually Ride London, but that's taking a pause for 25. So it's all, I'd say those two, but probably Ride London because it's my home. It's always on my home roads.
Mhm. Yeah, great. And what's the thing you're most proud of so far of your career?
Probably, I think it was actually finishing the Tour of Britain in 21 as a 20-year-old. I was, at uni. We were in as a complete wild card. As a team, we should never have been invited. We were the smallest Conti team. Because of COVID, I think we'd only raced like 3 or 4 times that year. Because of COVID restrictions in the UK meant we couldn't start racing until August. Outside, we couldn't leave the country till August, basically. So we'd sort of been racing like 2-hour max races. And we turned up to Tour of Britain not having a clue what we were doing. And we were just there for a good time, basically. And it was almost this sort of joke of like surviving. And I think we annoyed the organisers because we all as a team went on the podium wearing Crocs at sign-on. Because we were just like, we're just going to do something different because we have no clue what we're doing. We've no clue really why we're here. And yeah, the sort of few of us that made it round that day, I think that will always be the sort of highlight of our racing careers. I don't think anything really will ever match that feeling of knowing I really should not be in a World Tour peloton right now, but I'm surviving. And sort of we were literally, very small quantity and all random bikes on the roof of the car. We were all still on rim brakes where everyone had moved over to discs. Everything like that was just absolute looking back, it was chaos, but we were sort of in as the British wild card, and it was sort of, it was like, oh my God, we really shouldn't be here, especially because COVID years, it was quite a small field of just the World Tour teams, and it was like, oh flip, we really, and it was at the time where what's now Volker Wessels was still Park Hotel, and they were much smaller, and it was just us and Park Hotel fighting for survival. And it was great fun, but it was always be a highlight of just surviving. Yeah.
The odd ones out on a road trip.
Yeah, basically it was, looking back, crazy, but great fun.
Yeah, great. And if we could predict you standing on the top step of a podium in the future, what race would it be and why?
Um,
You can dream big
yeah,
and out loud. Don't
I'd
worry.
probably say stage of the Tour of Britain. I always suit, unfortunately, I hate that I do, but I always suit British roads. I can climb quite well, but I can't climb a mountain particularly well. I'm slightly too not built the right way. I'm not quite light enough. So I'm sort of power climber really. So I'd say a sort of rolling stage of the Tour of Britain, somewhere like Wales. That's my sort of gig really. That's what I do best and enjoy. So that would be the ultimate dream, but a very long way off dream, I guess.
Why not? Fingers crossed. Although it will be behind the paywall
Yeah,
in Britain. But hey,
don't start me.
no,
Don't.
sip. And then something about your studies. You recently finished your master. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah,
What
so it
was
was
this?
research. It was looking at the autistic experiences of cities across the
Yeah.
UK. So that was involved a lot of interviews with people. I got to meet a lot of people, talk about their challenges, what they find difficult, what they find easy, and that was really, really good. And it's something I really enjoy. I enjoy doing stuff that I think could and hopefully will benefit people down the line. And I think that almost is something that translates a little bit to me as a rider. I love helping teammates. I'm not a natural race winner. I've not got a very good sprint on me at all. And I suit specific races. So by default, I'm quite a domestique. That's something I love doing. So sort of it went quite nicely with my studies academically because I've always wanted to help others. I always think if I can make one person's life easier, then that's job done sort of thing. That's always how I see the world. So that is something I really enjoyed and hope to carry on doing a PhD, whether that's now or down the line in the future. But something I'd really like to do is keep studying to help people, basically.
Mhm.
Great work on and off the bike, Connie.
Thanks. Thank you.
Then let's talk a bit about awareness in and around the peloton. What do you think are some common misconceptions people have about neurodivergent athletes and maybe particularly in cycling?
I think society globally as a whole have an image, especially around autism, of a 5-year-old boy. And it's always the line people say like, oh, you're not like my cousin who's like 6 and he's male. And it's like, no, because that's the difference. So I think there's a little bit of sort of people don't understand it's not something you grow out of. That's you for your life. So I think there's a little bit of sort of people assuming, oh, but you're an adult now, you'll be fine. And I think in cycling, it's that again, it's the not understanding the different, how hard it is to almost exist in some situations. So I think people sort of think, oh, she's very inconsistent, say, or something like that. And it's like, no, it's more the environment I'm in is so inconsistent. In terms of like moving around, you're with different people, you're in different places, new places, everything like that. So I think that's something that almost needs more acceptance around. So if you understand that and you can help the environment, then that will help the athlete to be able to cope better. And I think at the top of the sport in particularly, there's a little bit of a sort of, unless you're exceptionally like, world champion and always up there and always winning, there's a little bit of a sort of, oh, we could replace you. And I know that has definitely gone on in the men's World Tour peloton, where they've almost had a rider who's had a diagnosis and then they've sort of gone, right, okay, your contract's up, or we're just going to end your contract, so that they can swap someone in who's more normal and easy to manage, which is, nobody is normal essentially in my books, but yeah. And I think that sort of thing needs to be changed. And I think you can't, until you can educate people on the strengths and how to support riders to bring out their strengths fully, you're not going to remove this sort of, oh, we're just going to get rid of somebody because they're harder to manage and they need more resource, say. Which, when it's a top men's world tour team, we have all the resource. It's a completely bizarre situation, but that's what stories of people I know I've heard firsthand. And it's you need the acceptance and the understanding from everybody to get people to release their full potential. And until you're getting the best out of all the neurodivergent athletes, because I think there are a lot out there, cycling as a sport attracts autistic brains in particular, because you've got the nice mix of it being a team sport but with individual training, and it's something you can really hyper focus on. There's numbers and everything like that a lot of autistic brains latch onto and really like. So until you can bring out the strength of the neurodivergent riders, I don't think you're getting the strongest racing you could have, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there is enough representation of neurodivergent athletes in professional sports? And how could we improve this, actually?
Yeah, I instantly was like, no, then. I think part of the problem is because of the environment. There's a lot of people who don't want to talk publicly about it. So until you've got an environment where if you come out and talk about it publicly, you're not going to get pushed out the door by your team, or it's not going to be an excuse for them to find other things to get rid of you at the end of your contract. So I think until we have more representation, it's not going to change. But in order to get the representation, you've got to have trust in the sport and in your own team and everything like that, that it's not going to affect you negatively. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, because whilst you need people to be open, you need them to be able to be open and talk publicly about their strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. But until you need both at the same time. And I mean, I am hopeful because society as a whole is getting better. People are understanding it more. So hopefully down the line, sport will follow in the same direction, and you'll be able to have riders who can publicly tell their team or wider audiences, this is what I find difficult and this is how you can help me and support me. But until we have an environment where people feel they can do that, it's much harder, as it limits the voices that are being heard, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And then what's something you'd like to see from other teams or cycling organizations in terms of supporting neurodivergent athletes?
I think understanding is the big impact, as I said before. And I think one of the ways you're going to do that is we need more neurodivergent staff with lived experience. Is that something I've always found? If I've got a neurodivergent DS, I'm much more happier, as I have the sort of trust in them to understand me. And even if their neurodivergence is completely different to mine, I know that they have that shared experience of being slightly different to the norm. So that's something I think is really important, and we need teams to help nurture management at the same time, so that management can then nurture the riders. So I think it is a sort of top-down approach that we need within sport, and I think teams can also learn a lot by listening to those that are out there. I know, like, going back to almost using football as an example, Lucy Bronze, who's a big high-profile female footballer in the UK, she'd done a really good interview the other week talking about her challenges being autistic. And that then sort of opened wider conversation. We need that within cycling, and we sort of do need someone high-profile to come out and talk about it, because I suspect there are high-profile riders who either are diagnosed or probably would be diagnosed if they were in front of a medical professional team, because without that, unless you've got role models there, you can't change the sort of narrative. And that goes both with riders and management, I think. And the more people, although it's obviously something that doesn't affect everybody, of course, there's neurodivergence affects 20% of the population, and that's everything. That's not just autism, that's mental health conditions and everything like that. So even in cycling, say that was slightly lower, there's still quite a lot of people. So I think we need people to be able to feel they can be open in order to change the narrative and to sort of educate those who don't necessarily understand. I think it's quite a long-winded answer, but it is basically awareness, and positive awareness is what we need.
Mm-hmm. And then one final question to wrap this episode up. So as we heard here in the episode, you're finding your voice and you want to share your story with others. So what message do you have for those who haven't found the courage yet to share their story?
I think there will always be people who will make comments. There will always be people who see it as a weakness to pick on, and that's something that I've experienced. Even as an adult, you sort of think, oh, people around you aren't going to make comments, but they do, and that's some people just don't understand. It's not necessarily nastiness; it's just lack of understanding. And I think that's always my way of looking at it. I always think people who are nasty just don't understand, or they have their own challenges that mean they don't understand difference. But on the whole, the support I've had, I had quite a big article last year in the BBC, for example, which is a big British news broadcast. And yes, there was some horrific comments made online, the horrific comments made by people I know, but the majority of people were so kind. And from that interview, I had people who I knew message me being like, hey, I didn't know. How can I help you? Is there anything I can do in a race situation? Anything like that. And people reaching out. And that made such a big difference. And it was knowing that the majority of people want to help others. But sometimes they don't know or they don't understand until you explain it to them. So that's my big thing, is that yes, it might be scary to talk about it. It might be scary to be public. But the majority of people are kind, and the majority of people want to help, and those that matter would want to help, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think we can end our episode actually on this note. So thank you, Connie, for being here with us today and for the courage to share your story. I think this was a very important and interesting episode for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much, Connie. And keep fighting, keep working, and you'll get on that podium of Tour of Britain.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So that's a wrap for episode 23 of She Rides. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the ride.
Absolutely. Women's cycling is packed with action, and we're here to bring you every twist and turn.
Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss upcoming episodes. And if you like today's show, a rating, like, or comment really helps us reach more listeners.
Follow us on Blue Sky and Instagram for behind-the-scenes updates, our hashtag Guess the Guest Game, and more.
Thanks to Connie for joining us today, and don't hesitate to share your questions or topics you'd like to cover.
And stay tuned for more exciting guests and join our prediction competition. Tag She Rides podcast on Blue Sky to show off your knowledge. And She Rides is powered by Kariam Endurance Coaching.
Thanks for listening to She Rides, the podcast where women's cycling takes the lead. Keep watching the fun, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.